About a month ago, Yuta, our main character, left a review on a book called About Love using his dummy account, the one he usually uses for writing complaints. But this time he surprised himself by giving the book a positive review. Unexpectedly, someone replied to his comment, agreeing that the book was indeed really good. That person said they wanted to meet someone else who had read it, meaning him. The two started chatting in DMs and messaged each other for a while. Eventually, the person suggested they go out for dinner together. Now, Yuta doesn't really go out much. He's the type who stays home all day and probably only owns 2 or 3 shirts. Part of him hesitated. Maybe the woman was teasing him, or maybe the whole thing was just a prank. But another part of him was curious. He kept wondering what she might be like in real life, and that curiosity was too strong to ignore. So he decided to meet her. The day finally came. Yuta waited near the mall where they had agreed to meet at 7 p.m. He messaged her to let her know where he was. It was his first time meeting someone from the internet, and he couldn't stop overthinking. Maybe she had already seen him and decided to go home, he thought. But then he saw her. A long-haired woman with great fashion sense was looking around for him. Yuta froze the moment he saw her. She was way more beautiful than he expected. His heart started pounding loudly as panic set in. Still, he somehow managed to gather his courage and followed her to the restaurant she had reserved just across the street. Even then, his brain was struggling to process everything. It had been so long since he had talked properly to a woman. Like most lonely guys who've never had a girlfriend, Yuta's self-esteem was pretty low. He even started thinking that this woman must be regretting meeting him. But when they accidentally made eye contact, she smiled at him. A warm, confident smile. That smile completely threw him off. His heart was beating louder than the cars outside. He didn't know it yet, but that same smile belonged to someone whose mind was a little unpredictable. They soon arrived at the restaurant. It was a fancy place, one that Yuta could never afford. Azusa, on the other hand, looked excited. She said she'd been wanting to come back here for a long time. Yuta looked lost, but Azusa teased him, saying, "This restaurant is perfect for a date," while smiling mischievously and showing off her sharp teeth. That made Yuta panic again. Did she really just call this a date? He quickly stammered, saying they should get to know each other first before going on an actual date. But Azusa laughed and explained that she was only recommending the place in case he ever needed a date spot, as if he would ever need one. Yuta was so embarrassed that he froze. Azusa looked confused, but to avoid awkwardness, they decided to head inside. The restaurant's interior screamed luxury, which only made Yuta more nervous. He told himself not to act stupid or get too excited. As they walked to their table, some nearby customers whispered to each other, wondering if Yuta and Azusa were a couple. Most of them assumed they weren't. They saw Yuta as some awkward guy who somehow got lucky. Their words hurt him, even if he pretended not to care. While Azusa looked over the menu, Yuta got lost in his thoughts again, telling himself not to get his hopes up. This was probably a one-time thing. He was so distracted that he didn't hear Azusa asking what he wanted to order. When he finally noticed, he snapped back to reality and awkwardly said, "I'll have a beer." Of course. Alcohol. The courage booster. They toasted to their first real-life meeting. Yuta, still nervous, gulped down his beer too quickly and started coughing. As he tried to catch his breath, Azusa leaned forward and gently wiped his mouth. She looked genuinely concerned. Yuta's eyes darted between her face and, well, other areas. Panicking, he quickly pulled back. Azusa immediately apologized, saying she didn't mean to make him uncomfortable. She was just worried about him. Feeling guilty, Yuta said that being kind to him wouldn't do her any good. He wasn't rich or handsome, so why would she even bother with him? Azusa smiled and said, "I really loved About Love. It's been one of my favorite books for years. When I saw your review, I got curious about what kind of person wrote it. It made me happy, so I wanted to meet you." Hearing that, Yuta felt even worse for being such a downer. He apologized for ruining the mood, saying he was just a gloomy loser who'd never had a girlfriend, someone who didn't take love seriously because it always felt out of reach for him. Even while apologizing, he couldn't stop putting himself down. It was just how he'd always been. As they talked, Azusa suddenly asked Yuta if not having a girlfriend really made him a loser. Before he could answer, she smiled and said, "Then let me be your girlfriend instead." That smile of hers wasn't innocent. Her eyes looked like trouble, the kind of look that could ruin a man's life. The narrator even compares her to a woman who once destroyed a mother and daughter's relationship. That's how dangerous she looked. But Yuta? He felt like he'd just ascended to heaven after hearing those words. Azusa repeated what she said, teasing that if Yuta didn't have a girlfriend, then yes, he was a loser. So if he got one, he'd finally stop being one. And if he lost his first time, he'd be free. Yuta's heart was about to explode. This woman would be the end of him, and maybe every other man she met. Her sweet, playful voice hit him right in his weak spot. He didn't know if she was serious or just joking. Before he could even ask, Azusa laughed and said she was kidding, undoing everything she just said. Now he was even more confused, and maybe a little disappointed that she wasn't serious. Azusa smiled again and apologized for teasing him while he was clearly nervous. But before Yuta could relax, she added, "Even if you're a loser, I still think you're cute." Those words hit him like lightning. He swallowed hard and begged her to stop teasing him, because his heart was beating so fast she might actually hear it. He tried to stop himself from falling for her, but it was already too late. Azusa's eyes, sharp and inviting, were like a siren's. They seemed to say, "Target locked." Yuta might have zero experience with women, but he was definitely a pro at self-sabotage. Still, maybe he could win this psycho-looking woman over, or end up heartbroken, broke, or hanging by a rope in the end. After dinner, Azusa stepped out of the restaurant smiling. Yuta followed, still so nervous that he could barely smile back. He hadn't exactly made a great impression. He choked on his beer, forgot his wallet, and scattered his coins everywhere. It was every introvert's nightmare. Embarrassed, he apologized for all the awkward things he'd done, saying he must have embarrassed her too. He kept looking down, too shy to meet her eyes. Trying to make up for it, Yuta offered to walk her to the station. The words just slipped out, and now he was panicking inside, wondering if he'd made the right choice. But Azusa only smiled, grabbed his arm, and said playfully, "Oh, you want to be my escort now?" Yuta didn't know what to say, but Azusa clearly didn't care. She took his arm anyway, holding him close like they were already dating. For Yuta, that was a victory. They'd only known each other for a few hours, and here he was walking arm in arm with a beautiful woman. He was so flustered, his face turned bright red. Trying to stay calm, he asked if she was drunk from the beer earlier. Azusa tilted her head and said, "Perhaps." That one word made him gulp again. He convinced himself she was just teasing him, and that once they reached the station, they'd say goodbye. Their first and last date. The walk to the station was quiet. After calming down a little, Yuta decided to take a small detour to spend a bit more time with her. It was bold of him, something he normally wouldn't do. But as they walked, he suddenly realized where they were. They had wandered into a love hotel district, surrounded by hotels on every side. His mind went blank. He panicked, trying to explain that it was just a coincidence, that he didn't mean to bring her here. Azusa just laughed. "Have you ever been to one before?" she asked teasingly. Yuta quickly said no, and Azusa said she hadn't either. Still, that didn't stop his imagination from running wild. He suddenly pictured Azusa in one of those hotels, dressed in a silk robe, and his face went completely red. Azusa noticed and leaned close to his ear. Her breath brushed against his skin as she whispered, "Are you thinking about something interesting? Maybe something about me?" Yuta jumped back immediately, telling her they should head straight to the station. He pointed the way like his life depended on it. He was definitely regretting that detour now. Or maybe he wasn't sure if he regretted it at all. Azusa stopped smiling then. Her expression changed. She reached out, held the back of his neck, and said in a low voice, "Listen to what I'm about to say." That dangerous smile returned, her sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. "What if," she said, "I don't want to go to the station yet?" Yuta froze. His heart was pounding so hard he couldn't think straight. He managed to say they could walk around a bit more, but Azusa seemed unconvinced. Maybe she thought he'd run away. So she pressed closer and said, "This might be your chance to stop being a loser, starting tonight." Her hand rested on his chest, and she said she just wanted his permission. Better safe than sorry. Her tone was dangerous, but also strangely soft. Would he take this opportunity? Of course he would. He was just a lonely guy with too many fantasies and too little real experience. He hadn't expected her to make such a bold move, but the way she spoke made it hard to say no. It felt like an invitation, one he didn't quite understand, but couldn't turn away from either. The night was still young, and Azusa's mind was full of dangerous ideas. She looked at Yuta and asked softly, "So, what do you want to do with me?" Yuta froze again, because he was definitely not the type of guy this woman usually dated. Yuta panicked, unsure what Azusa meant by what she just said. Her stare felt like it pierced right through his soul. His mind was in chaos. Should he take this as a chance to stop being a loser? Or should he refuse because he's not like other guys? In the end, the angel on his shoulder won. Yuta snapped out of it and told Azusa that what she said wasn't good. His reaction surprised her. She didn't expect him to respond like that. To explain himself, Yuta gave an example. "If I were a dangerous guy, and after bringing you to a hotel I did terrible things to you, like doing something bad on the bed," but Azusa misunderstood. Instead of getting his point, she only heard him saying he would do terrible things and teased him, asking if he was even confident enough to do that, since he didn't look like the type. Yuta panicked even more and quickly said he would never do anything like that. He only meant that she should value herself more. Azusa wasn't expecting him to be so serious, and Yuta felt extremely embarrassed for saying all that in front of her. Still, Azusa said she was glad to meet someone like him. He was different from the guys she usually met. Hearing that made Yuta happy. Maybe he did say the right thing after all. After a while, Azusa asked if they should head back. They walked arm in arm toward the station as if nothing had happened. When they arrived, Yuta apologized for keeping her out so late. Azusa didn't mind. She said she had fun, her face showing she didn't want the night to end, as if time had passed too quickly. Yuta didn't really get what she meant, and she brushed it off. Still holding onto his arm, Azusa asked if he was taking the same train. When Yuta said his route was different, she let go. For some reason, Yuta felt like a string had been cut. It was strange and sad that they were parting. Azusa thanked him for the day, and Yuta apologized again for keeping her out late, feeling bad that she went so far for a guy like him. She reminded him for the 9th time that night that she didn't mind. She had fun and was even more interested in him now. That smile of hers felt deadly. It made Yuta feel like he was floating. Before leaving, Azusa stepped close and slipped her hand into his pocket. Yuta panicked, afraid she might feel his little hero reacting. But all she did was pull out his phone and hand it to him with a smile. "If you ever want to meet again, feel free to contact me," she said before waving goodbye. Yuta just stood there, frozen, feeling both empty and full at the same time. The day had been unreal. Even on the train home, it all felt like a dream. His mind replayed the moment he got that chance of a lifetime. He couldn't help but daydream, imagining that if they were ever in a hotel again, that feast by the bed might actually happen. But then his phone buzzed. A message from Azusa, thanking him for the day. That's when he realized he hadn't even asked for her name before. He wasn't emotionally close to her yet, but let's root for this lonely guy. That night, Yuta couldn't sleep. The memories from their date kept replaying in his mind, especially when she told him they could meet again. Nobody had ever said that to him before. Still, he doubted that a pretty girl like her would really want to see him again. 10 days passed since Yuta's first offline date with Azusa, a stranger he met online, something that would make any parent panic. Since then, part of him kept hoping for a message from her. He checked his phone all the time, even when there was nothing. She hadn't messaged him, but her words, "Contact me anytime," kept him hoping. He thought of texting her first, but his self-esteem fought back. What if she thought he liked her too much? He did, but he was good at lying to himself to avoid obsession. While he sat confused, his phone buzzed. A Twitter notification. Someone had liked his post about being hungry. It was her. Excited, Yuta tweeted again, saying he wanted to watch the premiere of You and the Bouquet, hoping the algorithm and luck would reach her. Deep down, he hoped she'd reply and invite him to go together. Of course, nothing happened. But still, he told himself it was better to post publicly than to message her directly. After a while, he sent a risky text anyway. Because, hey, you only live once. An hour later, while gaming, he got a notification. Azusa liked his tweet. Just that one like made his whole day. He tried to calm down but couldn't stop thinking about what it meant. Did she want to watch the movie with him? But she hadn't messaged him. Maybe she was waiting for him to make the next move. It was a perfect excuse to ask her out again, but that was easier said than done. Yuta paced around, overthinking everything. Maybe he was just imagining things. Still, part of him couldn't let go of hope. Finally, he sent another risky text, inviting Azusa to meet again over the weekend. He began to sweat as regret hit him. What if she blocked him? What if he went too far? His mind ran wild with worry. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Azusa, the gorgeous woman, was busy working out. At this point, it's easy to see why Yuta had become obsessed with her. In the middle of her set, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Yuta. She smiled. A smile that could mean many things, either sweet or dangerous. We could never really tell. Back at Yuta's apartment, hours had passed since he sent that risky message, but Azusa hadn't read it yet. Yuta brushed his teeth, thinking he might have been blocked. He was already preparing himself to accept that harsh reality. Just as he was about to put his phone away, a notification popped up. It was her. Azusa had replied, politely declining his invitation because she already had plans with someone else that weekend. Still, she added that they could meet another time. Yuta's heart sank. He didn't know which was worse, being rejected or not seeing his crush for another half a month. He just stared at her message, replaying it in his head, overthinking everything until he went to bed. That single rejection felt like a sign that Azusa didn't want to see him again. Feeling defeated, Yuta started to move on. even deciding to delete their chat to forget about her. But just then, his phone buzzed again. A call from Azusa. He panicked, but immediately answered. Hearing her voice before sleeping felt like a dream come true. Yuta sat up straight in bed, stuttering a nervous, "Hello." Azusa apologized for calling so late and asked if they could talk. Her gentle voice made Yuta blush and sweat, like a nervous schoolboy. She said she was glad he reached out and asked how he'd been. Then, without hesitation, she asked if he wanted to meet up. Yuta froze. He told her it was about the movie, that he thought she'd like to watch it with him. His voice trembled as he explained himself, hoping to hear her say yes. Azusa giggled softly and asked why he sounded so nervous. Her voice so close to his ear gave him all sorts of feelings: excitement, warmth, maybe even desire. But Azusa apologized again, saying she'd be busy this week. Yuta quickly apologized too, saying he hadn't meant to bother her. He was overthinking everything, as usual. To make up for it, Azusa said she'd be free next week and that they could meet then. Yuta's heart jumped. With his voice still shaking, he said he'd love to go out with her, if she didn't mind. Azusa told him to be a good boy and wait, her tone so sweet it almost felt like she was whispering it right next to him. Yuta could barely handle it. Before hanging up, he managed to say goodnight, nearly passing out from excitement and nerves. Let's just say, Yuta and his tissues weren't getting much sleep that night. On the other end, Azusa lay on her bed, smiling and blushing too. She thought Yuta was cute, but was she being genuine or just playing with his emotions? Hard to tell. In the days that followed, we got a glimpse of Yuta's normal weekdays. He worked at a company, and lately he'd been doing better than usual. The thought of meeting Azusa again gave him motivation. He didn't even realize he was smiling from ear to ear at his desk until a coworker called his name sharply.
Hey guys, sorry for mid-editing, but I noticed a lot of you are watching my videos without subscribing. Our subscribe ratio is literally close to 0. I'd really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Thanks. Now, back to the recap.
Eri Takanashi, a colleague from his department. She didn't seem like the friendly type and immediately asked why he was grinning like an idiot. Yuta stammered an apology, asking if she needed anything. Eri showed him a document for an upcoming meeting. Yuta recognized it. It was something he'd taken over from another coworker who couldn't finish on time. Unfortunately, the numbers were wrong, and now Eri was pointing out every single mistake. Yuta had no choice but to take the blame. It was his fault for accepting the work in the first place. He apologized, but Eri didn't seem interested in excuses. Still, it seemed like she wasn't just annoyed about the document. She was also suspicious about how happy Yuta looked. She even teased that maybe he had a date coming up. The word date made Yuta panic. He tried to deny it, but another coworker overheard and got excited, shouting, "Yuta's going on a date!" Suddenly, he was surrounded by extroverted coworkers cheering for him. Yuta didn't even know how to react. He had joined a game company thinking it would be chill, but working here felt like high school all over again. He nervously admitted that he was just going to see a movie with someone he knew. His coworkers reacted like gossipy teenagers, teasing him nonstop. Eri didn't care about any of that. She just told him to fix the report as soon as possible and walked away. Another coworker laughed and said, "Man, Ari's still as cold as ever." Then he turned to Yuta and asked what he was planning to wear on his date. Yuta said he'd just wear as usual, a t-shirt and pants. The whole office burst out laughing. His coworker told him, "Come on, man. Girls put in effort for dates, makeup, clothes, everything. You should at least try to match that. Don't embarrass her, or she might dump you before the movie even starts." Yuta could only smile awkwardly, not sure what to say. Yuta was left speechless by his colleague's advice, but said he'd keep it in mind. Another coworker teased the guy, telling him not to scare Yuta too much, as if they were all underestimating him when it came to dating. Meanwhile, in another part of the office, Ari overheard their conversation by accident. To her, they sounded like high school boys, but she couldn't help feeling a bit jealous that their weird coworker, Yuta, was now going out with a woman. She thought whoever would date him must be just as odd or rude as he was. Still, Ari reminded herself that she also wanted a casual fling. "I should register on those dating apps soon," she muttered. "Can't let that weirdo get ahead of me." After work, Yuta went home and decided to give himself a small makeover. He remembered his colleague's advice about dressing better, but soon realized he hadn't bought decent clothes in years. That was a problem. Thinking about clothes reminded him of Azusa, always shining brightly in her classy, expensive outfits. Yuta didn't want to embarrass her on their second date. He wanted to match her energy, or at least try. He started searching his wardrobe for something nice, but all he found were his old emo shirts and joggers. He sighed, realizing they'd just make him look like a manipulative sad boy. especially with his current hairstyle. In the end, he didn't find anything worth wearing and decided to go shopping instead. Before heading out, he tried to research fashion trends online, but that turned out to be a mistake. The internet bombarded him with so many different styles that it overwhelmed his old-fashioned brain. Still, Utah was determined not to give up. He'd already made up his mind to look better, so he decided to go shopping that weekend. When the weekend came, Utah went to the shopping district near town. The stores glittered with lights and trendy displays, but he noticed that everyone seemed to be there with their girlfriends. He felt a bit out of place, standing alone, but reminded himself that he had a mission and tried to stay confident. While browsing through clothes, a cheerful store clerk suddenly greeted him, startling him so badly it felt like his soul jumped out of his body. The clerk began asking what kind of clothes he was looking for and started suggesting all sorts of trendy outfits. To the clerk, everything Yuta picked up looked great on him, even when it clearly didn't. The clerk talked nonstop about fashion terms and styles, bombarding Yuta with words he could barely understand. He had gone to the store to escape the confusion of the internet, but now it felt like the internet had turned into a person. Eventually, the clerk handed him a shirt and encouraged him to try it on. Before Yuta knew it, he was standing inside the dressing room. He wasn't sure what to think at first, but when he saw the clerk's eyes light up like they were looking at a celebrity, Yuta convinced himself it looked good. Even if the outfit was a little flashy, he told himself maybe it was time to be bold and take a chance. He even daydreamed about Azusa not recognizing him because of how different and stylish he looked. He also wanted to prove to his coworkers that he wasn't going to embarrass his date by showing up in boring clothes. Feeling confident, Yuta asked the clerk to show him more fancy outfits. One thing led to another, and by the end, he bought everything, spending 43,000 yen, nearly a month's salary. That's what he got for trying to impress a girl he'd only met once. As Yuta walked out of the store, happy with his new purchases, a familiar scent and figure passed by him. His heart reacted before his brain did. From a distance, he saw Azusa, and this time, she wasn't alone. At first, Yuta thought he was mistaken, but then he saw her clearly, smiling as she met up with a tall, handsome man. Azusa apologized for making the man wait, but he said it was fine. He could never stay mad at her. They smiled warmly at each other. Yuta's face said it all. His heart sank and his world seemed to fall apart in that instant. Had he misunderstood something? Or was she really seeing someone else? Ever since that day, Yuta looked completely drained. Still, even though he wanted to cancel their next date, he didn't. Before he could send a message, Azusa texted him first, so he decided to keep it to himself for now. When the day finally came, Azusa was waiting for him by the clock. She looked elegant, the kind of woman any man would dream of marrying. From afar, Yuta saw a strange man walk up to her, waving and asking if she was waiting for someone. The man apologized for being so forward, but Azusa clearly wasn't interested and ignored him. At first, Yuta thought the guy was someone she knew, but her expression said otherwise. Yuta hesitated for a moment, unsure what to do, until the man finally noticed him. That was his cue. He stepped forward and, in the most awkward and introverted way possible, told the stranger that Azusa was waiting for him. Azusa turned to look at Yuta when she heard his voice, but the stranger just burst out laughing. He mocked Yuta's flashy outfit, saying he looked like someone trying too hard to be a hero. The man told Azusa not to hang out with a loser like him, or she'd only embarrass herself, then suggested she should go with him instead. Yuta's eyes started to water after hearing the cruel things the stranger said to him, but Azusa acted like the man didn't exist. With a calm smile, she gently grabbed Yuta's arm and led him away, ignoring the guy completely. The stranger was left standing there in disbelief, wondering how such a lovely woman could be with someone like Yuta. But maybe, Yuta thought, he's the one being deceived here. Deep down, he felt guilty that Azusa had to protect him, when, just last week, she had been with that tall guy. He imagined that man would have protected her easily. Yuta's self-esteem was the only thing keeping him together that night. After walking for a while, they stopped at a small cafe and ordered drinks. Azusa got something cold, and Yuta went for something warm. Azusa laughed about what had happened earlier, saying it was a terrible encounter, but that she was glad they could finally meet again after all. Seeing her laugh made Yuta forget all about the stranger. Her smile lit up the whole room. When they started talking, Azusa asked why Yuta hadn't called out to her when he saw her earlier. Yuta awkwardly explained that he didn't want to bother her in public, that he thought he was actually doing her a favor by pretending not to know her. Azusa blinked in confusion. She didn't quite know how to respond to that. To ease the awkward moment, she tugged gently at his shirt and said with a teasing smile, "You're giving off a completely different vibe this time." Were you trying to look good for me? Her quiet stare made Yuta's heart race, and for a moment he froze. Then he quickly snapped out of it and said he just wanted to look a bit more normal. But his outfit clearly wasn't helping. Even though Azusa complimented him, Yuta still felt dumb for trying too hard. Azusa smiled and told him she actually found it charming when someone tried to be fashionable in their own way, unlike guys who just hit on random women. Her words always got to him, and though he tried not to fall too hard, she made it difficult every time she spoke. Still, Azusa couldn't help commenting that his clothes looked a little messy. Yuta didn't argue. After all, girls were always right. Since this was the second time someone had told him his outfit looked bad, he admitted it was probably true. As they kept talking about clothes, Azusa suddenly asked him to accompany her somewhere before the movie started. They went into a nearby mall. Yuta was confused at first, but Azusa explained that she wanted to help him pick out better clothes. Panicking, Yuta said it might not be right, but Azusa was already browsing the men's section like it was second nature. Seeing how familiar she seemed there made Yuta wonder again about that guy from last week, but he decided not to assume anything. After a few minutes, Azusa picked out a pair of trousers and said they'd look good on someone slender like him. She apologized for not knowing much about men's fashion, but said she was doing her best. With help from the clerk, they headed to the dressing room. Yuta once again felt like he was being forced to try on new things because of a girl. Even with the curtain closed, he felt nervous. Then another store clerk walked by and asked if they were on a shopping date. Azusa didn't say yes or no, which only made Yuta blush harder. Maybe this was a date, he thought, but she just didn't want to admit it. Soon after, Yuta finished changing and stepped out. His new outfit wasn't as loud as his old one, just a simple t-shirt and a blazer. The clerk complimented him, saying the blazer brought out his shape nicely. But what mattered most was Azusa's opinion. She smiled, tugged lightly on his shirt, and said it looked good on him. Yuta's heart pounded so fast it felt like thunder. Then the clerk jokingly called him Mr. Boyfriend and suggested he switch from glasses to contact lenses for a sharper look. But when Yuta took off his glasses, everything turned into a blur. He was nearly blind. Azusa laughed softly, took his glasses, and gently placed them back on his face. "I prefer you with glasses," she said. Her warm smile hit him like lightning. For the first time, Yuta felt confident about how he looked. If Azusa liked him this way, then maybe it wasn't so bad after all. After finishing up at the store, Azusa insisted on paying for the clothes. Yuta tried to stop her, pulling out his wallet, but she refused. "For me, this was fun," she said. "Think of it as a thank you gift, and a promise to go shopping with me again next time." Yuta couldn't believe his luck. Later, they sat together on a bench outside while waiting for their movie to start. Every second with her made him fall deeper, but he couldn't stop thinking about that guy from last week. What if he was Azusa's boyfriend? He wanted to be selfish and ignore the thought, but he knew it would only hurt him more later. He needed to clear things up. Gathering his courage, Yuta called out to her. "I saw you in town last week," he said. "Sorry if I'm wrong, but you were with a man. Was he your boyfriend?" He was shaking as he asked. It took everything in him just to say those words. Azusa blinked, thinking for a moment, and then laughed softly. "Oh, that day," she said. "You saw us?" Yuta gave a nervous smile. He felt small, like the moment he'd seen her meant nothing to her. Azusa leaned in a little. "Why did you want to know if he was my boyfriend?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. Yuta stammered. "I just thought if he was, then maybe it'd be wrong for us to meet like this." Azusa placed her hand on his thigh. Yuta froze as chills ran up his spine. "Is that really the only reason you asked?" she whispered. Yuta couldn't even think straight. His heart was racing. But before he could answer, Azusa smiled and said, "That man you saw was my older brother." Yuta's eyes widened. Of all the possibilities, that was the one he hadn't even considered. Azusa explained that her brother had come to town last week after another weird incident. Apparently, he'd almost been stabbed by a girl. She mentioned it so casually that it sounded like this kind of chaos was normal in her family. Yuta sat there speechless while Azusa laughed, teasing him for thinking her brother was her boyfriend. Yuta scratched his head, feeling embarrassed. He couldn't believe how much he'd overthought everything. He had almost canceled their plans just because he saw Azusa with her brother. This guy really needs to calm down, he thought. Azusa smiled teasingly. "You look relieved now," she said. Of course, Yuta couldn't admit that. He quickly denied it, but Azusa wouldn't let him off so easily. She leaned forward and gently touched his cheek. "You were jealous, weren't you?" she said with a soft grin. The touch didn't last long, but Yuta wished it had. His heart was racing so fast he could barely speak. "It's not like that," he stammered as usual, because whenever he got nervous, his words tripped over each other. Azusa finally stopped teasing. Don't worry, she said. We're not even dating, so there's no reason to be jealous. That stung a little, and Yuta felt something inside him break again. But before he could respond, Azusa noticed the time. Oh no, it's almost time for the movie, she said, quickly standing up and grabbing Yuta's hand to pull him along. She acted like nothing had happened. Yuta was still confused by what she meant earlier, but he decided to stop overthinking. After all, the man she'd been with wasn't her boyfriend, so he was free to spend time with her without guilt. They arrived at the cinema just in time. Azusa looked excited while Yuta was determined to make the day go smoothly. They still needed to buy tickets, but before she could say anything, Yuta told her he'd take care of it and ran off to the kiosk. Azusa smiled as she watched him go. It looked like she was starting to warm up to him, but was she really? At the kiosk, Yuta struggled over a very important decision. Should he buy seats next to each other or apart? Since this was his first time watching a movie with someone, he had no idea what normal people did. After a small mental crisis, he finally decided on side-by-side seats. He ran back, handed Azusa her ticket, and she thanked him sweetly. Yuta felt secretly happy that she didn't mind sitting next to him. When Azusa reached into her wallet to pay him back, he stopped her, reminding her that he still hadn't repaid her for the clothes she bought him. "Let's just call it even," he said with a shy smile. Azusa didn't argue. "Okay then." "Thank you," she said before they walked into Theater 2. Inside, the seats were filling up with couples, friends, and a few people alone. For once, Yuta was part of a couple, even if it wasn't official. He felt like everything was going perfectly, but as the lights dimmed, he realized he couldn't focus on the movie at all. Not when a beautiful goddess was sitting right beside him. He didn't even know where to rest his hands. Every small movement felt like a big deal. Then, out of nowhere, Azusa leaned closer and whispered in his ear, "It's starting to feel like a date now." Yuta froze. Her breath was warm against his ear, and he didn't know what to do. His heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Then she placed her hand on top of his and said softly, "Want to practice holding hands?" Her small hand gently squeezed his. She said it was just practice for when he went on a real date someday. But for Yuta, this was the real thing. He could only feel her presence, her warmth, and her scent filling his mind. As the lights went fully dark, Yuta decided to stop caring about what was real. He didn't know if it was right to hold hands with someone who wasn't his girlfriend, but he tightened his grip on her fingers anyway, as if to say, "I'll just enjoy this moment." The movie started. Their hands stayed together. Yuta didn't know how much time had passed. His mind was spinning. All he could focus on was Azusa's scent, the soft weight of her head brushing against his shoulder, and whether his palms were too sweaty. Then suddenly Azusa pulled her hand away. Yuta froze. The sudden emptiness made him panic. Did I do something wrong, he thought? Were my hands too sweaty? Did she get uncomfortable? He hated that he felt disappointed. This is stupid, he thought. She doesn't have to hold my hand the whole time. I should have been the one to let go. All those thoughts rushed through his brain in seconds. But then he noticed that Azusa had simply taken out a handkerchief. She was quietly wiping her tears. She was crying at the sad scene on screen. Yuta immediately felt bad for misunderstanding. He wanted to reach out again and comfort her, maybe hold her hand again. But he didn't have the courage. Azusa must have noticed his hesitation, because a moment later she leaned her head gently on his shoulder. Instinctively, Yuta straightened up a little, his face glowing red. A few minutes passed and the movie ended. The lights came back on and everything felt normal again. See, Yuta thought, things really do happen in the dark. Azusa stretched her arms after sitting for nearly 2 hours, then turned to him with a smile. "Let's go," she said. And they left the theater together. For Yuta, those 2 hours felt like a dream, one he didn't want to wake up from. Outside, Azusa said she really enjoyed the movie and was glad he invited her. Then she asked, "You've read the original story it's based on, right? Were there any big differences?" Yuta froze. He had no idea what to say, mostly because he hadn't paid attention at all. He was too distracted by her. Azusa tilted her head and smiled slyly. "You didn't even watch the movie, did you?" He panicked. "No, I did. I just, didn't expect you to cry." Azusa blinked, a light blush on her cheeks. "What, you didn't think I was human?" she teased. "I cry and get angry too, you know. Unless you have a problem with that?" Yuta immediately apologized, waving his hands nervously. "No, no, of course not." Azusa laughed softly, enjoying how Yuta was panicking, thinking she might be angry. Her light laughter only made him more flustered. He held a hand over his chest, trying to calm his racing heart. Azusa smiled and said, "Relax, I wouldn't get mad over something that small." Yuta sighed in relief, but she added teasingly, "Though if I did get angry, you'd probably throw a tantrum trying to calm me down." That thought made him blush even harder. When they reached the cinema's entrance, they realized it was already getting dark. Time had flown by so quickly. Azusa looked a little disappointed that their date was ending. Meanwhile, Yuta didn't know what to do next. He had only invited her to the movies, and now he didn't know how to end things properly. Deep down, he didn't want to part ways yet, not without getting to know her better. He needed an excuse to spend more time with her. Finally, he gathered his courage and blurted out, "Well, would you like to maybe grab something to eat together?" Azusa blinked, caught off guard. She didn't answer right away, which made Yuta nervous. Thinking she might turn him down, he quickly added, "It's fine if you're busy. I just thought we could talk about the movie more, that's all." He stopped himself before saying anything more embarrassing. Azusa tilted her head, piecing things together. "You just want to spend more time with me, don't you?" she said with a playful smile. Yuta stuttered, trying to deny it, but his words tangled up. Azusa leaned in close to hear what he was saying, her lips almost brushing his. That only made him panic more until finally he gave in and admitted it. "Yeah, you're right." Satisfied with his honesty, Azusa nodded. "All right, let's go. I'm getting hungry anyway." Before they left, she excused herself to fix her makeup. Yuta took the chance to look up restaurants nearby, but when he turned his phone on, he noticed a rare Twitter notification waiting for him. Someone had messaged him, maybe about the movie. But it didn't matter to him right now. His mind was too focused on Azusa. Meanwhile, somewhere else in Japan, a girl was nervously waiting for a reply to a risky text she had sent to her crush, probably the same message Yuta just received. But for him, it was already too late. His heart was already with someone else. When Azusa returned, she looked stunning after redoing her makeup. Together, they went to a small Japanese restaurant and came out later with happy smiles. They spent the meal talking about their impressions of the movie. It was the first time Yuta had ever shared something like that with someone in person, and he loved every minute of it. But soon that bittersweet feeling returned. He realized the night would end and they would have to part ways again. Before he could get too gloomy, Azusa suggested, "Let's take a short walk before heading home. It'll help us digest." Yuta agreed instantly. He knew it was another chance to spend more time with her. They walked together through a quiet park near the river, where the cool night breeze brushed against their faces. The place was beautiful, lit by the soft glow of the bridge nearby. Couples surrounded them, leaning close, whispering and sharing moments so intimate that Yuta felt embarrassed just watching. Azusa suddenly spoke, startling him. "What are you looking at?" Yuta panicked. Of course, he couldn't admit he'd been staring at the couples. Nothing. I was just thinking, this place is really beautiful," he said. Azusa smiled and agreed. "It's a popular date spot. I thought maybe you'd like to do something like that too." Before Yuta could react, she reached out, gently cupping his jaw and sliding her thumb across his lips. His heart stopped. Her gaze hinted at something deeper, maybe even a kiss. Yuta's brain went blank. Was this really happening? He closed his eyes, unsure what to do, waiting for what might come next. But then Azusa suddenly laughed. "I'm just kidding," she said brightly, pulling her hand away. Yuta's face turned bright red. His heart was beating so hard he had to grab the railing for support. Don't do that again," he said weakly. "What if you do that to another guy? He might get the wrong idea." Azusa turned back to him and smiled softly. "I wouldn't do that with anyone else. I trust you enough to know you wouldn't misunderstand." That comment hit him hard. For a moment, it felt like everything between them was just a teasing game. Like she was just keeping him interested. But Yuta didn't want to give up. Even if she was just playing around, he still wanted to know more about her. So, blushing furiously, he asked, "What's your name?" Azusa was caught off guard. "Huh?" she said, then burst out laughing. "You're just now asking that?" Her laughter made Yuta even redder, but he nodded nervously. "Yeah, I wanted to know." Still smiling, she said, "It's Azusa." Yuta repeated her name quietly, almost reverently. "Azusa," she grinned. "Say it again." He did, louder this time, though it came out awkward and rushed. Azusa chuckled, then leaned in close and whispered his name softly into his ear. Hearing his name in her voice nearly made Yuta melt. Her tone was so gentle it felt carved into his mind. In Japan, names carry meaning. Saying someone's name directly shows trust and closeness. Finally, to end the night, Azusa held out her pinky and said, "Promise me we'll hang out again sometime." Yuta linked his pinky with hers and smiled shyly. "Promise?" Yuta was confused at first, but caught on, returning Azusa's pinky promise and accepting her invitation. As they walked home, Azusa suggested they should watch a movie at his place next time, where they could stay up all night. Yuta hesitated, thinking his place was too small, but deep down, the idea of having a woman in his apartment, even once, sounded like a dream. A few days passed since their movie date. Yuta's weekend felt empty again, just like always. Still, a part of him wished they could hang out at his place. He had even cleaned his room with too much enthusiasm, only to feel lonelier when he realized Azusa wouldn't be coming over. Deep inside, he kept wishing for a message from her to pop up on his phone. But another part of him couldn't stop thinking about that man he saw with her. She had said it was her brother, in a life or death situation, and he told himself to stop overthinking. It wasn't his business anyway, so he distracted himself online. His timeline was quiet as usual. He barely talked to anyone. Then he noticed a reply under his movie post with Azusa. It had been sitting there for days. He couldn't just ignore it, or it would seem rude. The username read, Amatella. Meanwhile, somewhere else in Japan, a girl sitting at her PC got a notification. Yuta had replied to her comment. She smiled. This girl, Amatella, called him Dark Knight Sensei, which was unusual. Was Yuta secretly some kind of introverted Batman? Yuta apologized in his reply, saying he had already watched the movie last week, but in truth he had just wanted to relive the moments he shared with Azusa. Still, he kept waiting for Azusa to message him first. He didn't want to look clingy or annoying. Maybe that's why she hadn't replied. Maybe he'd been blocked before. He wouldn't be surprised. He had never spent a holiday with a woman. The only dates he'd had were with tissues and certain late-night websites. A few days without Azusa made him feel useless, like he couldn't function without her. That's how much she affected him just by existing. Then his phone buzzed. His heart jumped, but it was just a message from his mom asking about work and if she'd be getting a daughter-in-law soon. That made him feel worse. Marriage felt impossible. He didn't even have a girlfriend. Lately, ads for marriage apps had been popping up everywhere, but he didn't see the point. He'd probably just end up as another lonely guy on their servers. Still, his mind wandered. What if Azusa was his wife? He pictured her greeting him after work, cooking dinner, and, well, sharing a bath. It was a sweet daydream until he realized how pathetic it was. He slapped his cheeks to snap out of it. He also wondered, if he started dating someone else, would Azusa try to stop him? But that would only hurt both women. He pushed the thought away. A few moments later, another notification came in. This time, it was a DM from Amatella. Her message was long and full of energy. She thanked him for replying and said she felt honored. The sensei noticed her. She said she DM'd because she ran out of characters in her comment, an excuse just to keep talking. Yuta didn't expect someone so enthusiastic from one small reply. Still, she seemed harmless, just overly friendly. She even invited him to hang out. Curious, Yuta checked her profile. Her posts were mostly food pictures, manga, books, and anime figurines. From that, Yuta imagined she was a typical nerdy guy with glasses and a closet full of merch from his favorite waifu. Maybe Sensei was just a nickname he used for fun. Amatella suggested they watch that movie together, but Yuta wasn't sure. Rewatching it might overwrite the memory he had with Azusa. That thought made him hesitate. Before he could decline, Amatella sent another message, this time inviting him to an autograph session for Rion Amatsuki, the author of Devilish as Hell, one of Yuta's favorite light novels from high school. That caught his interest. Maybe it would distract him from missing Azusa. Without much hesitation, he replied and said he'd go. He even dug up his old copy of the book, feeling nostalgic and oddly excited for tomorrow. The next day came fast. The streets were busy as usual, and Yuta arrived at the meeting spot in his plain t-shirt and pants, his usual look. He wasn't used to meeting people from the internet, especially after Azusa, so he was nervous. He texted Amatella to say he had arrived and described his outfit so she could find him. She quickly replied, saying she'd just arrived too and was wearing a light blue dress. Yuta looked around, expecting to see some big otaku guy matching the image in his head. Instead, a short-haired girl tugged on his sleeve and said softly, "Dark Knight Sensei." Yuta froze. She introduced herself as Amatella. He was completely wrong. She wasn't a chubby, awkward guy behind a screen. She was a young woman. Whether she was too short or he was too tall didn't matter. What mattered was that she was real. He quickly composed himself and introduced himself properly. "My name's Yuta," he said, still in disbelief. Yuta apologized to Amatella and boldly but awkwardly admitted that he thought she was going to be a man. Amatella looked a little offended but forced a smile, saying she got that a lot. Still, she quickly explained how happy she was to finally meet him in person. She spoke in long, fast sentences, just like she did online. Deep down, Yuta felt a mix of guilt and shame. He couldn't ignore the fact that he had gone out with 2 different women within days. The thought of Azusa finding out and being disgusted by him didn't help either. But he shook it off, telling himself not to overthink. This wasn't a date. He was just a fan meeting a follower at an autograph event. Trying to sound casual, Yuta asked if they should get going, and Amatella agreed. But as they started walking, he felt something tug at his shirt. Her hand had accidentally gotten caught on his hem. Amatella immediately panicked, apologizing over and over again. Yuta tried to calm her down, saying it was fine and that he didn't take it the wrong way. Still, she wouldn't stop apologizing, rambling so fast she almost started explaining her life story. Yuta, feeling flustered himself, assured her it was no big deal and that he should be the one apologizing for startling her. Even then, she kept finding more reasons to say sorry, like losing her composure or being clumsy. Eventually, she changed the subject, saying she'd looked up the directions to the autograph event and would lead the way. The streets around them were tall and crowded, full of alleyways and turns, easy to get lost in. Yuta followed behind as Amatella checked her phone every few steps, turning left and right. After a while, Yuta started to worry. Amatella's eyes were tearing up slightly, a sign she might have realized they were lost. He gently asked if he could check the map for a moment. When she handed him the phone, he saw that they were actually close, just one more right turn. The alley looked a bit shady, narrow and quiet, but when they walked through, they found a long line of people. Relief washed over both of them. It really was the event. Yuta gave her credit for finding the way, even if they got a little turned around. Amatella seemed proud to hear his praise, smiling shyly. The line was long, as expected for such a famous light novel. While waiting, Yuta thanked her for inviting him. Reading the book again had made him nostalgic. Amatella said she didn't mind at all. She was a huge fan too, ever since elementary school. That surprised Yuta. "Wait, you read Devilish as Hell back in elementary?" he asked. She nodded proudly. "Yeah, I'm 19 now, so that was about 10 years ago. I was in 3rd grade back then." Yuta suddenly felt ancient. "Wasn't that story a bit intense for a 3rd grader?" He joked. Amatella giggled. "It was. But the main character, Rumia, was a student succubus in training, so I kind of related to her. Honestly, I only bought the book because of the cover, but I got hooked. Especially the part where Rumia falls into darkness after meeting the senior succubus." She laughed nervously. "That scene really stuck with me. I even drew her a few times back then." Yuta raised an eyebrow, impressed. "You can draw?" "Kind of," she said quickly, waving it off. "They're not that good." To change the subject, Amatella asked who his favorite character was. "I like Breath-chan," Yuta replied. "The angel from Volume 3. Amatella's eyes lit up. "Oh, I know her. An angel with a bad personality. Kinda ironic, right?" She smirked slightly. "Sounds like someone you might have a crush on recently." Yuta didn't know what to say. But before he could respond, Amatella swayed on her feet. Her face was flushed and sweaty. She looked dizzy. "Hey, are you okay?" Yuta asked, panicking. People around them began to notice. I'm fine," she mumbled, her voice weak. Yuta quickly told her they should find somewhere to sit before she passed out. Spotting a nearby cafe, he guided her there carefully. She could barely walk, but they made it inside. An hour later, Amatella was sipping a cold drink, like she hadn't had water in days. Once she regained her color, she looked down apologetically. "I'm so sorry, Yuta. I ruined the day." Yuta shook his head. "Don't say that, it's fine." Both of them were overly polite, apologizing too much for things that didn't need apologies. Still, something about that moment, the quiet cafe, the awkward air, made Yuta feel strangely at ease. Yuta also apologized for not noticing sooner. Since Amatella said she rarely left her room, he guessed she had become sensitive to sunlight. Or maybe just overworked. Standing outside for hours probably made her feel sick. Yuta joked that she was turning into a vampire now, which made Amatella laugh and quickly change the subject. She said Yuta looked really cool when he helped her get to the cafe so gracefully, and she wondered if he was popular with girls. In reality, Yuta wasn't. If not for that book review he once wrote online, he probably wouldn't have talked to any women for years, except his coworker. Still, talking with Amatella made him realize he could now speak to women more calmly than before. He thought that if this had happened to him a while ago, he wouldn't have known what to do if a girl fainted in front of him. Thanks to meeting Azusa, though, he had learned how to act and what to say. It felt good to know he had grown a bit. Amatella called out to him softly, and Yuta told her he was glad she was feeling better. But he didn't encourage her to continue to the autograph session, suggesting she rest instead. That made her feel worse. She knew Yuta had really been looking forward to meeting the author of Devilish as Hell. Because of her weakness, they had to skip it. Yuta tried to brush it off, like it wasn't a big deal. But Amatella suddenly confessed something unexpected. She said that even though she loved the book and wanted it signed, meeting him was already enough. The event was just an excuse. Yuta was stunned. He didn't understand what he had done to seem so cool to a 19-year-old girl. His overthinking started again. Maybe she had mistaken him for someone else? But Amatella stopped him right there. She said she could never mistake him for anyone else. She had been wanting to meet him for years. That completely threw Yuta off. Her words made no sense to him at first. Then Amatella leaned closer and said something that froze him. Yuta was once known as Dark Knight. At first he didn't recognize the name, but it sounded oddly familiar. He dug deep into his memories until he finally remembered. It was the pen name he used back in middle and high school to post his own stories online. That was a part of his life he had locked away. A dark and embarrassing past he never wanted to revisit. Now that it made sense, he asked how Amatella even knew about that. She began explaining, back in middle school, she didn't have many friends and spent her free time reading stories online. Among those stories were Yuta's. She became one of his biggest fans. But one day, his account just disappeared. For Amatella, that felt like the end of the world. She couldn't accept that Dark Knight was gone. So she started searching, checking his old posts, his birthday, his followers, until she finally figured out that Dark Knight was actually Yuta. Yuta was speechless. Her dedication was both flattering and terrifying. Amatella smiled as she talked about how much his old stories meant to her. Yuta barely remembered them, calling them embarrassing old work he didn't want to think about. Still, Amatella said she truly loved them and regretted never being able to tell him before he vanished. Now, finally meeting him, she could express that in person. Seeing her innocent and honest smile, Yuta couldn't bring himself to reject her feelings. It wouldn't hurt to at least accept her gratitude, so he nodded. Excited, Amatella pulled out a piece of colored paper from her bag and asked for his autograph. Yuta hesitated. It was overwhelming. But deep down, he had actually practiced signing his name years ago. With a little push, he agreed. She watched him so intensely that it made him nervous, but once he finished, Amatella lit up with joy and thanked him over and over. Then she asked for one more favor, to shake his hand like a real fan. Yuta awkwardly agreed. For Amatella, it was a dream come true. She wiped her hands nervously before reaching out, trembling with excitement. When she finally shook his hand, she looked like she could ascend to heaven any moment. For Yuta, it was strange but oddly touching. He realized how every person's hands feel different. Hers were small and warm. After spending some time chatting and eating at the cafe, they decided to move on. Since they had already eaten, they paid separately. Despite her small frame, Amatella ate quite a lot. To cool off, she took off her jacket, revealing a cute anime shirt with a maid-style collar, pretty common for fans in Japan. When Yuta asked where they should go next, Amatella smiled and said they should head somewhere indoors since apparently she had just discovered she was allergic to the sun. With that, the two started walking toward the mall. For some reason, Yuta found himself walking into an anime and manga store purely out of instinct. It had been years since he last kept up with new anime, and as he looked around, he started to wonder if he even belonged there anymore. But apparently they had come to the right place, because Amatella's eyes lit up the moment she saw the shelves lined with books. The store even had a special section for Garumani behind a curtain, which immediately caught Amatella's attention. She was as excited as a kid sneaking into a forbidden zone, and seeing her that happy made Yuta smile. For him, it didn't really matter where they were, as long as she was enjoying herself. Amatella picked up a book she didn't recognize but seemed deeply interested in, mumbling to herself that she might buy it later. Watching her like that, Yuta thought how nice it would be to have a girlfriend who shared his hobbies. But then he quickly scolded himself. Those were dangerous thoughts. To snap out of it, he pinched himself. Unfortunately, Amatella saw that. Her eyes widened, and she immediately started apologizing, thinking she must have said something wrong. Yuta tried to explain that it was nothing, but she still blamed herself. He could only sigh quietly and remind himself to keep a polite distance so no misunderstandings would happen. Before they knew it, the day had flown by and it was time to part ways. Amatella bowed politely and thanked Yuta for spending the day with her. She said she had a wonderful time and hoped they could hang out again someday, still calling him Dark Knight, which made him cringe inside. After waving goodbye, Yuta finally headed home. Later that night, he posted a picture online of his first autograph. He must have snapped it quickly because even the followers barely caught a glimpse of it. With nothing much to do afterward, Yuta decided to take a bath and go to bed early. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, Azusa was sitting in a quiet bar. She scrolled through her feed and saw Yuta's new post, the one with the autograph. Her eyes lingered on the picture a little too long. The fact that he had been with someone else that day made her smirk faintly. She hummed to herself, her expression unreadable. It gave off a strange teasing vibe. Was she jealous? Or just amused? Hard to tell. A few days passed after Yuta's offline meeting with Amatella. Life went back to normal, and one evening, he found himself heading home late from work. Sitting on the train, he posted another quick update. Finally heading home. He didn't have anyone in particular to tell, so sharing it online felt like enough. His phone buzzed with new notifications. It was Amatella again, this time sending him a picture of a random stray cat she had seen, then another photo, and another. Their chat was starting to look like her personal diary of daily life, filled with food pictures, random objects, and tiny stories. Yuta wasn't exactly annoyed. He just wasn't used to this kind of attention. Deep down, though, he wished that another woman would send him a message. As he scrolled through his inbox, he stopped at a familiar name, Azusa. It had been a while since they last spoke, but even if he didn't admit it, he'd been waiting to hear from her again. Still, Amatella's messages were a welcome distraction. Sometimes he caught himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, she liked him, but he always stopped himself before overthinking too far. Don't get the wrong idea, he told himself, even pinching his thigh to keep his inner dog calm. He convinced himself that Amatella's admiration came purely from being a fan of his old writing. Still, the way she called him Dark Knight in that soft, cute voice, it had an effect on him. Knowing that someone out there genuinely liked his stories stirred something in him. For the first time in years, Yuta thought about writing again. He remembered a line from an old writing book he once read. When you don't know what to write, think about what you can't forget, and what you never want to forget. His thoughts immediately drifted to Azusa, the way she smiled, their quiet moments together, and the memory of seeing her that day with another man. Those were things he could never forget. Maybe they could be his inspiration. He opened his notes app, ready to write something honest for once. But before he could even type a word, a notification popped up on his screen. It was a message from Azusa. "What are you doing right now?" Yuta froze. His heart nearly jumped out of his chest. He'd been waiting for weeks for her to message him, and now that it happened, he didn't even know how to react. He stared at the screen for a moment, then suddenly stood up and rushed off the train. Moments later, he arrived breathless at the place Azusa had mentioned. She was already there, dressed elegantly as always. Seeing his exhausted state, she smiled and apologized for calling him out so suddenly. She had been in town for work and just wanted to see him. She noticed how out of breath he was and laughed softly, telling him not to rush so much next time. "You'll make it look like you were dying to see me," she teased. Panicking, Yuta stammered out an excuse, but his shaking voice gave him away. Azusa smiled knowingly, reached out and squeezed his shoulder gently as they walked together. That single touch almost made his knees give out. To catch up properly, Azusa suggested they have dinner at a nearby Japanese restaurant. As the waitress guided them to their table for two, Yuta tried his best to calm his nerves. Even now, after all this time, sitting face to face with his crush still made his heart race. But at least this time, he was ready to face the night. The waitress guided them into a private room with a traditional low table. Yuta froze for a second when he realized they wouldn't be sitting across from each other, but side by side. Feeling nervous, he tried to make light conversation, saying he didn't even know this restaurant had such seating. Azusa only smiled at him, that calm, seductive kind of smile, and invited him to sit next to her. He had no choice but to sit down beside her, doing his best to keep still so he wouldn't accidentally touch her. Azusa started chatting, commenting that he looked good in his suit and that it suited him well. As she said that, she reached over and straightened his tie, leaning in a little too close for him to handle. Yuta did his best to stay composed, though his heart was racing. Luckily, the waitress came back just in time, giving him a moment to breathe. Azusa smiled at the waitress and told Yuta to order whatever he wanted. Tonight's dinner would be her treat. Yuta could barely think about food. His heart already felt full just sitting next to her. Still, they began their meal after the drinks were served. Azusa asked how his life had been lately, her tone casual but curious. Yuta said there wasn't much going on, just work and home back and forth. Then he paused, remembering that one side quest from a few days ago. Meeting Amatella, he hesitated a little and Azusa noticed. Right then, Yuta's phone started buzzing like crazy. Someone was spamming his messages. He guessed it was probably Amatella again, but he didn't want to talk about that with Azusa. Of course, that only made her more curious. She leaned in slightly, resting her hand over his and asking, "So, have you gotten yourself a girlfriend since we last met?" Her eyes looked straight into his, sharp enough to pull the truth out of him. Yuta panicked and quickly denied it, but then a thought hit him. What if Azusa found out about Amatella? Would she stop meeting him? He knew it wasn't right to use Amatella this way, but technically he wasn't lying. So scratching the back of his neck nervously, Yuta admitted, "I didn't get a girlfriend, but I did meet a girl last week. She follows me on Twitter and we went to an event together. She's really friendly." He let out a weak laugh. Azusa didn't respond right away. She just stared at him, eyes blank, expression unreadable. Yuta froze. Did I just sell Amatella's life to this woman? He thought nervously. After a few seconds, Azusa finally smiled and said cheerfully, "That's great, I'm glad you're meeting new people." Her tone was light, but Yuta could feel something else beneath it. He tried not to look too surprised, but he knew he'd shown it anyway. Azusa noticed his expression and asked curiously, "So what kind of person is she?" Yuta thought for a moment before answering. "She's 19. She's got this unique sense of fashion. Kind of cute but bold. We've only met once." Azusa tilted her head, giving him a teasing look. "Do you like her or something?" "That's too early to say," Yuta stammered, panicking. Azusa laughed softly. "You're right, no one falls in love that quickly, just because they share the same interests." Her words hit a little too close to home. She was describing him perfectly, without realizing it. Trying to recover, Yuta mentioned that he and Amatella shared similar hobbies, and that it'd be nice to date someone like her. He instantly regretted saying that out loud. But Azusa only smiled again, and said she hoped things would go well for him. For some reason, that made Yuta's chest tighten. The air between them grew awkward. Then Azusa spoke again, her tone calm but serious. "If things really do work out between you and that girl, maybe we shouldn't meet like this anymore." Those words hit him hard. The last thing he wanted was for their meetings to end. He tried to speak but stumbled over his words, unable to find the right thing to say. Azusa looked him in the eyes. "You wouldn't want the woman you like meeting some other guy, right?" she said playfully, though her gaze was sharp. At this point, it felt like she was toying with him, just like the title of this story. Yuta tried to agree with her, but he couldn't fully express what he wanted to say. Azusa already seemed to understand anyway. He finally muttered that things with Amatella weren't that serious. Azusa looked puzzled. "Didn't you just say she was friendly and nice?" Realizing he'd contradicted himself, Yuta cursed inwardly. Azusa leaned closer, her eyes narrowing with that teasing glint again. "So," she whispered, "did you only mention that girl to make me jealous?" She gently held his chin, forcing him to look at her. "You thought that if I heard about another girl, I'd cling to you? Is that it?" she said, smiling faintly. Yuta's heart was pounding. He couldn't take it anymore. All the feelings he'd been holding back burst out as he admitted, "Yeah, maybe I was just trying to make you jealous. I know there's no way something could ever happen between us. We're from different worlds." That caught Azusa off guard. For once, her confident smile faded and she looked genuinely surprised. It was rare to see her that way, and strangely, it felt satisfying to Yuta. After a while, Azusa suddenly burst out laughing. She found it ridiculous that Yuta thought they were from different worlds when he barely even knew her. Yuta felt embarrassed, but he couldn't help smiling. He was enjoying this strange, unpredictable game between them. Then Azusa leaned forward with a sweet smile. "How about we watch each other's favorite movies this weekend?" she suggested. "At your place." Yuta froze. The girl he had been secretly longing for was asking to hang out again, and at his home of all places. It was the kind of invitation he'd been waiting for a long time, so there was no way he could just say no. Still, it felt too sudden. He wasn't even sure if his place was good enough for her. But Azusa had already made up her mind. Watching movies together would be a way to understand each other better. It was a great idea, at least for her. Yuta, on the other hand, looked nervous, like he was forced to say yes. Inside, he felt pathetic for acting like this in front of her. A knock came at the door. It was the waitress, letting them know that last orders were being taken before closing. Azusa realized she had to catch her train soon, so they decided to part ways for the night, planning to meet again that weekend. Even though Yuta hadn't officially agreed yet, Azusa didn't seem worried. She'd wait for his confirmation later. After that intense dinner, Yuta sat on his usual train home, replaying everything in his mind, what had happened and what might happen that weekend. He still felt guilty for mentioning both Amatella and Azusa during dinner. Would either of them start to dislike him now? He expected Azusa to be disgusted, but instead, she asked him to hang out again. Maybe she didn't mind at all. Thinking about watching movies together quickly led his imagination down a dangerous path, picturing the two of them sitting close, the movie forgotten, Azusa moving on top of him, teasing him with that confident smile. He quickly stopped himself from thinking further. Not the kind of thought you should have on a public train. His dog needed to stay quiet. Luckily, his phone buzzed, snapping him out of it. It was a message from Amatella. When he checked, he saw that she had deleted a few of her earlier messages and had written, "I guess I'm no good after all." Worried, Yuta replied right away asking what was wrong. Amatella quickly messaged back saying she wanted to meet him that weekend. She had something important to talk about, something only he could help with. Yuta froze. He already had possible plans with Azusa that same weekend. Now he didn't know who to spend it with. Both girls had their own red flags, and he wasn't sure if he was mature enough to handle it. Then his mind drifted into a dream, a wild fantasy scene. Both Azusa and Amatella stood before him in one frame, wearing mature, alluring outfits. They were fighting over who Yuta should choose. Team A, Amatella, saying he should choose her because she's the one who truly loves him. Team B, Azusa, saying he should pick her because she's the only one who can satisfy him. Having both women close to him like that made his whole body heat up. Honestly, anyone would want to trade places with him right then. But when they asked who he would choose, Yuta lowered his head and said, "I can't choose either of you. I don't even have the right to." That's how little he thought of himself. The girl stared at him blankly, then stood up. Amatella said coldly that she was disappointed. After they had both confessed so openly, he still couldn't choose. Then Azusa added sharply, "Once a loser, always a loser." Both girls turned away and left. "Wait, don't go," Yuta called after them, but they kept walking. Deep down, he didn't want to lose either of them, yet he still couldn't bring himself to choose. Then, beep, beep, the sound of his alarm clock. Yuta woke up in his bed, birds chirping outside. It was just another dream, another one of his frustrating fantasies. But this one hit harder because it came from real events. The conversation with Azusa about Amatella, and the plan to watch movies that weekend. Meanwhile, Amatella had messaged again, saying she wanted to discuss something in person that coming Saturday. Yuta replied that he'd check his schedule first, though in reality he just went to bed to delay making a decision. Back in his quiet, uneventful life, Yuta never thought he'd reach a point where two girls wanted to see him at the same time. He wondered what a normal person would do in this situation. Probably reschedule, one on Saturday, the other on Sunday. Simple, right? Basic logic. But Yuta wasn't sure he even had that. His plan, if you could call it that, was maybe to let Amatella come over on Saturday afternoon or Sunday. It made sense, except his self-esteem kept whispering that maybe he shouldn't be seeing either of them at all. He sat alone at his small table, turning on the TV. The news talked about a famous actor caught cheating again. It felt like the universe was mocking him. He muttered to himself, "If it were me, I'd never betray someone I love, or someone who loves me." But deep down he knew. His situation wasn't much different. He'd have to make a choice soon. Was it Amatella, the one who truly admired him? Or Azusa, the woman he could never stop yearning for? As he thought about it, he realized the truth. His feelings for Azusa were probably something that would never come true. Yuta thought to himself that he didn't even have the right to love Azusa if he couldn't be honest. But speaking of honesty, yesterday, when he tried to get her attention by mentioning another girl, he realized something. That moment was him trying to be sincere, in the worst possible way. Now he was confused about who to choose. Amatella was just a fan, not of him, but of his old pen name, Dark Knight. If he kept meeting her, it would feel like he was taking advantage of her admiration, and that didn't sit right with him. He knew Amatella deserved someone her own age, not an older guy like him. Still, those thoughts hurt, as if he was punching himself in the chest. To snap out of it, Yuta literally slapped his own face. The sound echoed through the room. He decided on something. He would sacrifice this connection with Amatella, for her sake, and maybe his own sanity. He opened his phone and typed a message to her, saying politely that his mother was coming from his hometown to visit, so he wouldn't be able to meet that weekend. It was a lie, but a gentle one, something to soften the blow. After staring at the screen for a moment, he took a deep breath and sent it. Just a few seconds later, a reply arrived. This girl really never sleeps, he thought. Amatella apologized right away. She said she had misunderstood things, that she'd been getting too close and too clingy. She promised to give him space and handle things on her own, so he wouldn't hate her. That single line hit him hard. Yuta's inner people-pleaser kicked in. He quickly replied, assuring her that he didn't hate her at all. But as he reread her message, he remembered she said there was something important she wanted to talk about. What if it was serious? His mind pictured Amatella crying, maybe being bullied or going through something painful. If that were true, she should be talking to her family or friends, not some random guy she met once. Even so, Yuta told himself that from now on, he'd try to be more sincere, not just polite, not just someone who does things to make others happy. But knowing him, we, the readers, know how this goes. He'd probably cave in again the moment someone else needed him, before he even realized Saturday arrived. Yuta's room was spotless. He had cleaned it like his life depended on it. Then the doorbell rang. He rushed to the door, nervous but ready. And there she was. Amatella stood on the other side, smiling shyly. Amatella was invited over to Yuta's tiny apartment. It was her first time stepping into her senpai's personal space, and she was thrilled. As soon as she entered, she took a deep breath. The air smelled like him. That familiar scent made her heart beat faster. Yeah, this girl was definitely obsessed with him. Anyway, let's not dive into her obsession with Dark Knight. Instead, let's focus on how Yuta got himself into this strange situation. Even though he knew Azusa was supposed to visit later that night, he couldn't bring himself to say no to Amatella's request. He agreed to meet her just until evening. And that's how Amatella, a fellow otaku and, more importantly, a girl, ended up in his room. Not because he had any romantic plans, but because she said she wanted to talk about something important. To get straight to the point, Yuta asked her what she wanted to discuss. Amatella turned to him and said she needed a model for an art assignment. Yuta froze. That was it? He had been expecting something serious, not this. He felt awkward and insecure. Why would anyone want him as a model? But Amatella smiled and told him she was actually thankful he agreed. She didn't have many male friends, and her only other option was her younger brother, who apparently looked too much like her to work as a model. That mental image made Yuta picture a male version of Amatella. Same face, same energy, just with short hair, and he couldn't unsee it. He offered her a pillow to sit on and asked if she wanted him to change clothes for the drawing. Amatella joked that she could just imagine him without them and draw the clothes herself. Yuta instantly turned red. You don't make that kind of joke to a man, especially one already trying to keep his thoughts clean. To change the subject, he asked what pose she needed. Amatella looked around and shyly asked if she could use his bed for it. He agreed, though his heart rate shot up. He sat down while Amatella knelt beside the bed, adjusting his posture, even telling him to sit wider. It felt embarrassingly suggestive, and Yuta was doing his best not to let his imagination run wild. Meanwhile, Amatella was fighting her own intrusive thoughts. When she accidentally placed her hand on his chest to adjust his position, her face turned bright red. She quickly apologized while Yuta sat frozen in silence. After that awkward moment, they both decided to focus. Amatella moved to her small desk, set out her pencils and sketchbook, and began to draw. Yuta held the pose while she worked, and every now and then their eyes met. He could see how serious she was. It felt like a calm scene out of Titanic, except thankfully he was fully clothed. After some time, Amatella smiled and announced that she was done. Yuta walked over, curious to see it, but she hesitated. She said it wasn't that good yet. Yuta disagreed immediately. He was impressed. Her drawing looked amazing. He praised her talent, and she blushed, saying she still needed to improve because her dream was to become an illustrator someday. Then she added something that completely threw Yuta off. I also want you to be my first. Yuta's brain short-circuited. In a flash, he imagined Amatella on his bed, whispering, "Be gentle," and he panicked. He quickly asked what she really meant, and she clarified, I want to draw my first cover illustration for a novel by Dark Knight. Of course, that made more sense. Kind of. Yuta sighed in relief, but explained that he hadn't written or published anything in a long time. Amatella refused to accept that. She told him she believed in him, that if he tried, he could definitely publish something again. But then she added, "If you don't, I'll wait forever. I won't take any other cover illustration jobs until you do." What kind of emotional blackmail was that? This girl was gaslighting him with kindness. Yuta's people-pleaser instinct kicked in again. He promised her that he'd do his best to publish a novel and make her the illustrator for it. That single promise made Amatella tear up. She grabbed his hands and thanked him again and again, saying he gave her purpose. Trying to lighten the mood, Yuta asked why she didn't just take a photo of him instead of spending hours drawing. Amatella froze. She hadn't even thought of that. They both burst out laughing. Despite all the weirdness and risk of letting her come over, Yuta actually enjoyed their time together. It was fun. Innocent even. He was happy to have a female friend for once, but that peace didn't last. Yuta's phone buzzed. It was a message from Azusa. She had just arrived at the station and was heading toward his apartment. Yuta's face went pale. He turned to Amatella and nervously said that his other friend was coming earlier than expected, which was his polite way of telling her to run. They had about 10 minutes before Azusa could show up. Amatella quickly packed her sketchbook and pencils while Yuta helped her, panicking the entire time. Because if Azusa walked in right now, it would be the end of him. While Amatella was still packing her things to leave, Yuta quickly grabbed his phone and texted Azusa, "Sorry, I'm still cleaning my room. Could you give me 10 more minutes, please?" It felt like his heart stopped until Azusa replied, "Sure, I'll take a little detour." Yuta let out a huge sigh of relief, as if he'd just started breathing again. Then, when Amatella suddenly called out to him, he jumped like a startled cat. She was just letting him know that she was done packing and ready to go, but before she left, Yuta apologized for rushing her out. Amatella just smiled and said he didn't need to apologize. She said she should be the one saying sorry for causing trouble, and that she was really thankful for his help that day. Even while panicking inside, Yuta smiled back and told her he was glad he could help. But before he could finish, Amatella suddenly hugged him tight. "I love you, sensei," she said. "Way too soon, but we'll let her have that moment." Yuta froze. His body went stiff like he'd been hit by lightning. Amatella continued softly, saying, "I'm your biggest fan." And honestly, that was probably true. It's not like this guy had any other fans. Yuta, not used to being touched like that, quickly pulled back, waving his hands awkwardly. He told her, "You're my one and only." He meant it as in my only fan, but of course, Amatella took it as something else entirely. Her heart started racing, and she felt even more in love. She wanted to hug him again, but Yuta stepped back with his arms raised, reminding her gently that it was time for her to go. That felt like a slap of reality for her. She had to leave her beloved sensei alone like that. Before walking out, she asked for reassurance. "We'll see each other again, right? You're not mad at me, are you?" Yuta promised it was fine. After she left, he shut the door and finally exhaled, praying she hadn't forgotten anything behind. The only thing Amatella left behind was her love and her ghostly presence. He sat down at his table only to notice a new message from Azusa saying she was on her way. His heart started pounding again. He replied instantly, but before he could even think, his doorbell rang. Azusa was already there. He rushed to open the door, his expression screaming guilt. Yuta really was the worst liar, and the worst at hiding lies. Azusa noticed his awkward reaction and laughed. She found it cute how panicked he looked, just opening the door. "May I come in?" she asked. "Oh, of course," Yuta replied, too enthusiastically, stepping aside to let her in. Once inside, Azusa handed him a small cake she'd picked up on her way and politely bowed. A simple, sweet gesture. In Yuta's mind, the moment felt surreal. A girl like Azusa. In his room? Unreal. But then, something caught Azusa's attention. She sniffed lightly, leaning in close to his neck. You smell nice," she said innocently. Yuta froze again. That scent probably came from Amatella's earlier hug. He quickly covered his neck and tried to play it off. "Oh, must be your imagination," he said nervously. "Nice try, Yuta," trying to gaslight a potential yandere. They walked into his room and Azusa smiled when she saw how tidy it was. "Your room really fits you," she said, which Yuta didn't quite understand, but took as a compliment. She then asked if she could sit on his bed. That alone was enough to make him blush. The creak of the mattress was like a thunderclap in his mind. Azusa, a beautiful girl, was on his bed, and this wasn't a dream. Azusa looked around and said playfully, "It's just the two of us tonight. What should we do to pass the time?" Yuta panicked. He knew they were supposed to watch a movie, but his brain was showing him other scenes. Scenes that would definitely break the bed. His mouth moved faster than his thoughts. "Movies," he blurted out. Azusa blinked in surprise, then burst into laughter. His awkwardness was almost charming in a painful way. After calming down, Azusa invited him to sit next to her. He hesitated, then carefully sat on the edge beside her, moving like it was his first time touching a bed. His mind raced. Amatella was just here. And now Azusa's sitting right where she was. 2 girls in one day. A new record. Still, guilt ate at him. He felt like a cheater, even though he wasn't dating either of them. Azusa noticed his uneasy expression. "Hey," she said softly. "Penny for your thoughts?" Yuta shook his head quickly. "It's nothing." That was probably the right move because Azusa cupped his cheeks and made him look at her. "Then don't think about anything else tonight," she said with a sweet but intense smile. "It's just us." Her closeness made Yuta's heart thump even louder. He realized he should focus on her, at least for the night, and tried to relax. Meanwhile, outside, Amatella was walking down the street humming happily. She couldn't stop smiling, replaying Yuta's words in her head. "You're my one and only." Those words made her feel alive. But her joy faded when she passed a girl carrying a cake. Something about that girl made her stop. She turned her head and saw the direction she was walking, toward Yuta's apartment. Her heart sank. Amatella realized that must have been the friend Yuta mentioned earlier. Her chest tightened, and before she knew it, her legs were moving on their own. She followed Azusa at a distance, and when she saw her walk into Yuta's building, her fears were confirmed. Her heart shattered into pieces. Right after that heartbreaking flashback of Amatella, we return to Yuta and Azusa in the room together. Azusa suddenly says, "Can I stay over tonight?" Yuta is shocked. It's his first time having a girl stay in his room, other than his mother or sister. Azusa explains she wants to watch 2 movies, so staying over would be more convenient than going home late. However, Yuta starts to panic. There's only one bed in the room. We all know what that means. Azusa notices his hesitation and tells him it's fine. She doesn't want to force him. But before he can stop himself, Yuta blurts out, "You can stay." Azusa smiles and accepts without question. With that decided, they move on to choosing what to watch. Azusa turns to face the TV, giving Yuta an unexpected view of her back and her slim waist. Since Yuta doesn't own many DVDs, he suggests watching something from his subscription service. But he's embarrassed because his TV isn't very big. To watch comfortably from the bed, he'd have to move it around. He keeps talking nervously, trying to explain, until Azusa gives him a blank look like he said something strange. Realizing how awkward he's being, Yuta apologizes and says it's because he hasn't eaten all day. In truth, it's guilt eating him alive. Azusa smiles kindly. You don't have to be embarrassed, I'm hungry too. She suggests they go out and grab food before watching the movies. But, as soon as Yuta opens the door, it's pouring rain. They can't go out or even order delivery. No one wants to drive through that weather. And while Azusa is thinking about food, Yuta is secretly worrying about Amatella. Did she make it home safely? With no other choice, they decide to cook something themselves. Yuta checks the fridge and finds some instant noodles and snacks, enough to make a quick meal. Azusa looks surprised when Yuta starts cooking. You can cook? She asks. He waves off the compliment. It's just survival. I've lived alone for a while. Still, Azusa looks impressed. She playfully joins in when he hypes himself up, laughing as he blushes again. When she offers to help, Yuta politely refuses. You're the guest. Just relax and wait for your 5-star meal. He looks up a recipe online, getting more nervous as he goes. Suddenly, Azusa hugs him from behind, whispering, So what are you making? In a soft, teasing voice. Yuta jumps, panicking. But please, go sit down. It's dangerous near the stove. If I were him, I wouldn't mind where her hands landed. But Yuta's too innocent for that. After some time, he manages to serve fried noodles with a fried egg on top. It doesn't look fancy, but Azusa's eyes light up. She's starving. They sit together and start eating. Yuta watches nervously, waiting for her reaction. It's really good, Azusa says, happily eating every bite. Yuta sighs in relief. Seeing her enjoy the food makes him feel proud. He knows Azusa is used to expensive meals, so he assumes she's just being polite. But then she adds, I love food that someone cooks for me. My parents are always busy, so I never get home-cooked meals. Yuta's eyes widen. He realizes how wrong he was. Azusa smiles softly. Now you know one thing about me. Her words ease Yuta's worries. He feels so moved that he blurts out, I'll cook for you any time you want. Azusa blinks, surprised, then laughs. That's cute. Yuta turns red again, regretting how honest he sounded. After eating, Azusa thanks him and gathers the dishes to wash, despite his protests. While washing, she suddenly says, Hey, shall we take a bath? Yuta nearly chokes. Of course, it's not that kind of manga. So only Azusa takes a bath while Yuta waits outside, nervously holding a towel and spare clothes. When Azusa finishes, she opens the door slightly, teasing him with a glimpse before stepping out in his oversized shirt. Yuta quickly turns away, flustered. She thanks him again for the shirt. He notices she isn't wearing any shorts, and his mind starts to spiral, so he rushes off to take his own bath to calm down. While showering, Yuta keeps scolding himself for thinking that way. He knows he needs to stay composed. Outside, Azusa uses his hairdryer, humming softly. Then, disaster strikes. Yuta's phone lights up. It's a message from Amatella. Azusa sees it. The text says, Thank you for hanging out with me today. You were so kind, as always. But before Azusa can read more, the message disappears. Amatella deleted it. She probably realized she'd said too much. And that, my friends, is how Yuta's peaceful night turns into another emotional storm. Azusa went silent after seeing the message on Yuta's phone. She didn't say anything, pretending she hadn't noticed, but the air felt heavy, like she was thinking, this might be my last night with him. Without another word, she continued drying her hair. When Yuta came out of the bath, he apologized for making her wait. Azusa looked distant, lost in thought. When Yuta called her name, she blinked and came back to herself, quickly putting on a smile to hide how she felt. She said, Let's watch your favorite movie tonight instead. Yuta was confused. That wasn't what they planned earlier. They were supposed to watch her favorite movie. Still, he didn't argue. If that's what she wanted, he'd go along with it. He could tell something was off, but he didn't want to ask. Azusa explained softly, I want you to think of me whenever you watch your favorite movie. That caught Yuta completely off guard. He froze. Her words sounded a little too possessive, but at the same time, he couldn't deny how they made his heart race. The movie began. The room was dark, and their shoulders touched. The small, innocent contact made Yuta's chest tighten. It felt strange, almost dangerous. Azusa seemed calm, but her presence made his thoughts spin out of control. If I were him, I'd have jumped out the window by now. By the time the movie ended, it was already late. Azusa yawned and said, Let's sleep, I'm tired. Yuta nodded and offered her the bed. He said he'd sleep on the couch, like the polite guy he was. Or maybe he just didn't want to risk waking up with a pillow over his head. Still, he couldn't help but admit to himself that sleeping in the same room as her felt different. As he turned his back and lay down on the couch, he hoped nothing awkward would happen. But before he could settle in, he felt a hand grab his arm. "Sleep on the bed, too," Azusa said, her eyes glimmering, sharp yet soft, almost seductive. Yuta froze. His heart raced like crazy. Azusa continued, "You'll just wake up sore if you sleep there. The bed's big enough for two. What could go wrong?" Before he could answer, she pulled him toward her. Now they were both on the bed, and Yuta was facing the wall, trying not to move a muscle. He could feel her close behind him. Too close. His thoughts went wild. What are adults even supposed to do in this kind of situation? But this wasn't a normal situation. This was Azusa, the beautiful, unpredictable girl who could go from gentle to dangerous in seconds, and Yuta, the quiet introvert who didn't know how to breathe right now. Azusa suddenly leaned close to his neck and tickled him under his arm. He flinched, startled, as she giggled. "Are you going to get me back for that?" she teased, her voice playful, but her expression unreadable. Yuta turned toward her, unsure what to do. She was wearing light, lacy sleepwear, something that made it even harder for him to think straight. Still, she waited for his move. With a nervous smile, he reached out and tickled her back. At first it was all laughter, until his hand accidentally brushed a little too high. Azusa let out a small, strange sound, and Yuta froze, terrified that he'd hurt her. But instead she caught his hand and smiled faintly. "Did you want to do something more?" she asked in a soft, teasing tone. At that moment, Yuta didn't know if he was about to see heaven, or the end of his single life forever.